Hi, welcome back to another edition of Inside Great Lakes Sailing. My name is Greg Norman, your host. It's hard to believe it's mid-February and it's 55 degrees outside, but I think we have an extraordinary show today. We get a chance to go all the way to Miami, Florida. We're back in December 22. The annual Orange Bowl Youth International Regatta was held, and we get a chance to talk to Chris Block. And specifically, what we're going to talk to Chris about is the televised version of the race and some insight to how they pulled it off, and maybe where some of the youth race sailing can go with getting a little bit more publicity. So it was an interesting show. We got a little bit of a shout out from John Pierce from U.S. Sailing, who was the youth director, and we'll show you that too. And quite a bit of the footage from the race, and you'll see if you enjoy that. And we start with Mitch Brindley, who is the Old Dominion University sailing coach and a legend, was just giving the Nathan Harshoff Award by U.S. Sailing for all his dedication. He's been head of the college sailing organization for 21 years. He'll be stepping down in May, and we'll get a chance to talk to him, and I think that'll be a really interesting conversation about where college sail is going. So we kind of went from last week where we were talking with the single-handed guys. We're going to talk and kind of concentrate on the youth sailing this week and talk a little bit about college and Optima sailing from Florida. So we'll be back in a minute. Welcome back. We're talking with Mitch Brindley, who is the head coach at Old Dominion University down in Virginia, at Norfolk. And Mitch, you were just awarded what I assume is the Super Bowl of trophies for U.S. Sailing, which is the Nathan Harshoff Award for all your commitments to sailing. And if you look at your background, 7-time national champion, you've been at ODU for 28 seasons now, and you are a legend. The guys that you've coached and the guys who've been under you in terms of assistant coaches. So first of all, congratulations on the award. And I don't think it comes by a surprise because you are probably the best college sailing coach that's ever lived.
Well, I don't know. There are a lot of great college sailing coaches out there, and I'm fortunate that I get to do this and have had a great group of athletes over the years that let them do their job and they do well. So
you are the ICSA president, and you have been for quite a long time. You'll be stepping down in May,
yep,
which is part of the tenure that you kind of helped put together to maybe some new blood. But the award itself is, it's directed at somebody who's really been exemplary in the sailing community, and you've been that. Do you recognize that? I'm just curious.
I think in sailing across the board, we don't do a lot of the things we do for the recognition or the trophies or anything like that. Obviously, it's great to get honored and recognized, but I've as a professional coach, having a great organization like college sailing, ICSA, it's important to the operation of the sport, and so. I love sailing. I love the sport, and I want to do everything I can to continue to grow and develop the sport and make it better, leave it a better sport. And so that's always been my ambition and my initiative.
As sports fans, should we know more about college sailing?
Sure, absolutely. The great thing about college sailing, just like every other college sport, is you have an affinity group. We've got a fan base, and it's awesome to have a fan base. And we have sport fans at Old Dominion. They might not know anything about sailing, but they'll know if we've done really well, and they can name out some of our greats, like Anna Tunnicliffe or Terry Hutchinson or Sally Barkow or something like that. And so I can be a sports fan and not know a whole lot about lacrosse, but you can be a fan of, if you're a fan of Michigan State, you're going to be a fan of all their sports. And so, for sailing, for us at Old Dominion, it's, we'd love to have, we love it when all the ODU sports fans can get behind us and we can represent the university community as a whole.
Just so I know and our audience knows, you're only racing 420s in college, am I correct?
420. We race 420s and FJs in our double-handed boats. We also sail lasers and laser radials, or ILCA 6s and 7s for the single-handed competition, as well as we have a match race discipline which is typically like a J22 or sonar, And then a lot of schools support what we call offshore or big boat or keelboat events in a variety of big boats. So, for example, at the Naval Academy, a lot of the surface academies and some other programs have very supportive larger boat programs, sailing big keelboats.
What's the percentage between small boats and big boats
Uh,
for student athlete?
so for the most part, this double-handed sailing is the dominant part of our sport in college sailing. We do have, it's just more programs are represented in the double-handed, whether it's fleet racing or team racing, 3-on-3 team racing.
Where do you recruit?
All over. I would say in the last 15 years, particular, there's been a lot of growth in high school sailing around the country, and it's a great way. It's a great avenue or kind of on ramp into the sport. And then, we're the top programs are obviously looking at high school programs, but you're also looking, at junior and youth championships in different classes and things like that. And so, just like we might do it within other sports.
You mentioned lacrosse, and part of lacrosse growth, if you look at certain areas in the country, Minnesota, Denver, San Diego, have not been traditional East Coast spots to find talent, but those are really hotbeds right now. What are hotbeds for college sailing? Is it, and I'm assuming warm weather versus cold weather?
Yeah, we have pockets of growth. A lot of it, you look at where there's strong youth teams, and you'll get that. You get some great kids coming out of Chicago, for example, that grow up at some of the programs in Chicago. You've got great youth development out of South Florida and Lauderdale area and Miami, Coconut Grove, those areas, St. Pete, certainly in the Southern California, great high school programs out in Southern California, and so really we get them from we're getting sailors developing from around the country. So.
The sport, we had a conversation with Paul Caird, who's obviously taken over the Olympic part of U.S. sailing. Yeah. And his point was that you have to have numbers, but numbers only come with money and then the opportunity to bring those. The numbers U.S. sailing is looked at over the last few years, especially with junior programs. It's not progressing maybe at the rate that it might be in other parts of the world. Again, New Zealand, maybe Australia. They put more of a national approach to it. And it seems like with this new group, Alan Osfield, who's the new CEO and one of the conversations that we want to have with him next week is, spectator sport versus participant sport. I think that's a really legitimate conversation. How do we attract more kids to sailing?
One of the great things about sailing is that it does develop so much self-reliance and independence, and a kind of self-autonomy that is so important. When you're in a boat, whether you're in a small opti or a radial or a double-handed dinghy, you've got a lot of autonomy in what you do and how you control the boat, you and your partner or the crew in the boat. And that can be very empowering if we give kids the opportunity to try it out and develop it. It's like every sport, every youth sport. We face the same challenges in sailing as they do in other youth sports. I mean, you're competing every day against the phone and the time that someone has, and you're trying to attract the attention away from those things. And sailing does take time to get good, and also it takes resources too. And so the more we can do to remove barriers to that access, if we're only counting on the top athletes in our sport to come out of the top yacht clubs in our sport, we're self-limiting right there. And so in college sailing, we have it's a kind of a low bar to a low. We try to make it as frictionless as possible to come into the sport, and especially at the varsity programs, the resources from the universities to support those athletes and develop those athletes and train those athletes is tremendous. It's a tremendous asset for the sailing community as a whole, and really for our Olympic development as well. It's just tapping into those resources that are available on some of these college campuses.
One of the conversations that I talked with Paul about is they're looking at this U.S. ski model in terms of the way they're going to approach it, not only from a philosophical standpoint, but also from a financial standpoint. And one of the things we've learned in ski racing is that we're getting more kids time to free ski and to work on whatever that specific subject may be. In the short period I had with the junior sailing program here for a couple of years, it seems to me we don't give enough sandlot baseball. And that's been kind of a thread as part of this show. Just let kids get in the boat and go a little bit.
Yep.
Maybe under some supervision, but it seems to me that every time we turn around, there's got to be a coach with a microphone or a megaphone, yelling at them. And you wonder if that has a little bit of the hindrance. Do we get better by letting them just get in boats and figure some of this stuff out for themselves?
Yeah, there's you get much better when you can self-diagnose and when you can feel the boat. It's just a lot of the feel. What makes a kid or an adult, for that matter, fast is a very gentle feel of the boat. When you really can understand when the boat is loaded properly, or when you're pinching too high in the wind, or when you're too far off the wind. Just that feeling that you get, and time in the boat does it. And if you're creating a pleasurable experience for them by just letting them sail, that's a big part of it, especially at that junior and youth level. I know for me, my kids, I've tried to give them a lot of opportunity to just have sailed on their own. Just go sailing. If they want to go sailing, yeah, but as long as it's, my kid was when he was 12, I remember putting him in an Opti with a VHF radio, and you go sailing, I could look out my window and check on him. And having those opportunities for kids is important. And you don't have to have a coach telling you exactly what you're doing right or wrong over and over again. Usually it's the coach telling you what you're doing wrong over and over again anyway. And so it's good to let the kids just sail a little bit.
A little later in the show, we had a chance to interview Chris Block, who is the regatta chairman for the Orange Bowl race that happened in December. Yeah. And there's some footage that we showed that will be part of the show, where as they were coming around a mark, there was literally must have been 70 boats coming around the same mark. And it looked like a turnstile on a byway or on a freeway. Some of the kids were going wide, but the funny part about the video was they all had smiles on their faces. And some of the coaches were around were kind of being scattered and being a little more excited about it. The kids seemed just to have a good time with it. It was, whether they finished first or 100th, it didn't seem to matter, which I thought was the point that he was trying to make. So the sandlot part of it, getting involved in it, is also, you find a better love of it, I would think, too.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I would agree with that. Okay.
One of the conversations we've had recently is that 420s are talking about being replaced by 29ers. Have you heard this conversation? Or have you had that conversation?
I think in the kind of the development pathway, there is an important place for both the 420 and the 29er. It's hard to go from an Opti into a 29er. You're not going to be big enough. You're not going to be, you might not be strong enough, and you might not have the skills that you need yet. A 420 is a good pathway to progress through. I mean, some kids might be able to make that jump pretty easily. But I think I think it's a great step from one to the other. I think 29er is a fun boat. I think it's a very important part of the development process, but I don't think it's going to replace a 420 or Club 420.
The guys with the most money in the business of sailing, and I say Sail GP and the America's Cup, are all going to foils. Are we missing something at the lower levels by maybe not introducing that to kids as part of that growth pattern?
Well, I think it should be part of the process too. Again, having toys for kids to play with is important. It's foiling's hard, but it's probably a lot easier to learn as a kid than as someone like myself. But I think that again, it's all part of I think sailing different boats, different types of boats, makes a better sailor. Just like playing different sports makes a better athlete.
You still compete nationally, internationally as a sailor. You still coach. Am I correct?
I still coach. I haven't had the opportunity to compete internationally in a while since it's been a while, probably since I've had kids myself. So as my kids are getting older, I'm looking forward to doing some of that kind of sailing myself again. But I do still get to coach at a top level, and I get to sail locally here in a variety of different boats. So,
Well, my question becomes, this is the only sport where you can be competitive nationally and internationally at the age of 50, 60. It's just one of those
oh,
sports.
absolutely.
That's, with the exception of golf playing seniors, that's certainly not true of almost any sport. So sometimes I think the understanding of our sport gets lost with other sports because that connection is there are guys that are coaching are still as competitive as they might have been, and that's not true in football, basketball, and almost any other sport. So my follow-up question is, if you're still racing, does that help your coaching a little bit?
Absolutely. I think it's an important part of coaching is trying to spend some time mastering the craft yourself. Whether it's in a racing environment or a practice environment or a training environment, having that opportunity to, and sometimes it's also as a coach learning a new skill outside of the sport. You might take up a new activity because you're remembering what it's like to learn something and try to get good at something. And so I think that's a big part of being a coach is recognizing that. So
Do you recruit multi-sport athletes?
I love to, particularly if we're looking for someone who might be newer to the sport. If someone has played high school, maybe they were a starter high school soccer or field hockey, lacrosse, a good team sport like that. It's a huge benefit to your team when you bring someone in that really understands that. So often if someone has grown up and they've moved from an opti to a radial or maybe to a 420 or even a 29er, it's a much smaller, even if they're part of a training squad, it's not, they don't really, sometimes quite a few of them can miss the mark on what it's like to be part of a team, a 20-person team or something like that. But someone that's played basketball or football or soccer or any of the ball sports, I think that's a big part of it. Just learn how to be a team, but also the skill development, the athleticism, the coordination of those of playing those other sports is important from a development. And it's been proven. A lot of that's what youth hockey has been a big proponent of that, and so many other sports are recognizing that the early specialization can be detrimental to your long-term development.
You guys spend a lot of time in the weight room?
They do. Our team, we're in the weight room with our strength coach twice a week for an hour, twice a week. And anytime I talk to a prospect, whether they're coming to Old Dominion or anywhere, just from as a incoming college athlete for a sailing team, be in shape, be strong, be fit. That's a big difference. That's one of the big differences coming out of a high school or youth junior program. Everyone could be more fit for college sailing.
You've coached for a long time. You've obviously coached some of the best in the sport. You as a coach know when somebody walks in as a freshman, they're going to be this, that, or the other, or is there a science to it, or is it a luck, or do you just know? I mean, obviously you have kids come in that are really successful junior sailors that also fail at the college level. Do you have
you do, you definitely, and I think that's true probably in a lot of sports where you have someone that has come in as an elite athlete at the youth level, and they have a hard time making the transition to a different part of the sport. There's I think back on some of our top athletes that we've had that came to Old Dominion who were not, maybe they hadn't won a top championship or anything as a kid yet, and they were certainly flying under everyone's radar. You look at what their athletic ability is, how they relate to the team, what their drive is like, and you can tell, and you kind of look at them as like, okay, we want to give them a lot of opportunity early and kind of fast track them because they're going to be good. And we've been fortunate. We've had some great athletes like that that have really come on, and they had some of the foundation, and have really done well, and are continue to do well in the sport.
In your coaching eye, what makes a champion? Because you've had a few. Is there an ingredient?
It does. I think it's the same for any sport, whether it's sailing or anything else. It's someone that has a lot of personal drive, a lot of discipline, and has that really has that good, healthy learner's mindset that every day they're out to get better and out to learn, and then they recognize when they make mistakes. They're not going to dwell on the mistakes, but they're going to understand what they were and improve. And whether it was Anna or it's so many of our sailors, the top ones, they're always they're one of the first ones on the water every day, and they're going to get the most out of it. And they come back and they're writing in their notebooks what they learned. Sport.
Yeah, I think you can look at kids and sometimes you think, whoa, yeah, and find out. So sometimes I think it's just a crapshoot. Sometimes because you can't. The one thing you can't measure is heart. I know that sounds
well. It's tough, right? Yeah,
that's the one thing that every coach says. Well, this, that, and the other, but there's always those exceptions. Just a couple quick questions on. You grew up in Sugar Land, which is obviously the Houston area. You end up at Old Dominion. Yep. How did the guy get to obviously Houston's on the water? So did it start at an early age for you sailing?
I did. I probably went through a junior program, summer camp program at Houston, in LaPorte at Houston Yacht Club as a kid. And that's where I really learned to sail. Sailing sunfish back then, and started racing. And that's really when I enjoyed it, hanging out with friends on the water, sailing sunfish, laser twos, sailing on big boats. And that's where we kind of got started.
You have a degree in economics, but was coaching always in the back of your brain when you were in college?
Not at all. It was not in my mind at all. I thought I was going to be an economist and do something dreadful like that. But I remember one point my dad, like when I was still in school, my dad's like, "Oh, why don't you be a coach?" And I'm thinking, no way, I don't want to do that. That's crazy. But it's kind of worked out.
When did it change? When did the opportunity change? Because you went to Old Dominion as an assistant coach, did you not?
Yeah, so I started as an assistant coach and realized I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the coaching part. I enjoy helping people, achieve their goals and get better. And I, kind of that management side of things I've enjoyed.
You've obviously you've been very successful. What does spring of 2023 look like?
Well, we've been we were on the water this morning with practice. We've been on the water for 2 weeks now at ODU, and on Tuesdays and Thursdays, being an on-campus sailing center, we can practice in the morning efficiently, 2 days a week, and so we had a beautiful sail practice this morning, and focusing on team racing right now. Kind of the fun thing about being a college coach is, every year you get to keep working on stuff, and we've got a pretty good group of sailors coming along, of athletes coming along, and so it'd be interesting to see. We're doing a lot of kind of fundamental team race tactic training right now, and as I told the team, it looked like we have learning going on, so that's what we're after.
You get many kids out of the Great Lakes?
Yes. Let's see. I've got a couple. Emma Friedauer from Ohio is a freshman, and Elizabeth Gildia from Chicago. She's a junior-ish. It's hard to keep track with the COVID. She it's a senior now, I think. So.
That's a question. We were lucky enough to interview the offshore program from the University of Toledo club team, who actually competed nationally in Annapolis last year and this past summer, last spring, and they actually did quite well. I mean, It's amazing how well some of the club teams are competing, and That's one of
Yeah.
the markets that's in sailing in terms of college sailing. That's really that's
Yeah.
growing.
You can do well with the club program, and there's some great club teams out there, and there have been some well-funded, well-organized club teams, and it's great to see.
And just for my own edification, are you 12 and a half scholarships like every other program at Old Dominion?
No, so that's a really good question. And sailing, the college sailing has a rule that prohibits scholarships or financial aid based on sailing ability. And so it's essentially modeled after a D3 or Ivy League rule. So if you think about
Okay.
the Ivy League rule,
Yep.
and it does put some strain on some teams that, if they're at institutions that can't offer the same amount of institutional aid, financial aid or need-based aid or other merit aid as others, it can be some challenges for them. But a lot of our rule doesn't prohibit other merit-based scholarships or financial aid or anything like that. So, or academic scholarships.
Oh, that's cool. Talked about 4 or 5 different people who've crossed your path, and they have nothing but the best things to say about you as a coach and what you do to instill their love of the sport. Anna talked a lot about just how much she learned under you, and I think it's a well-deserved award from U.S. Sailing. And so I just wanted to congratulate you, and I appreciate that you taking some time and talking with us.
Thank you, Greg. I really appreciate the interest, and it's great to see what you're doing to promote sailing.
Want to thank Mitch for taking a couple of seconds out to talk to us about the award from U.S. Sailing and his dedication. And I don't use the word legend very often, but it was really fun talking to him. And if you check out his record, you'll find out that he's at the top of his sport, and he's a deserved honor for a guy who's been head of the College Coaching Association for 21 years. So we thank him for spending some time. Up next is all the way to Biscayne Bay to talk to Chris Block about the Optimist Regatta, the Orange Bowl Optimist Regatta that was staged in December of 22. So we'll be back in a second.
Highlights of this race will be featured on Inside Great Lakes Sailing this weekend. How fun is that?
Oh, all right. Yeah, that's right. I know Greg.
Oh, you do know Greg. Okay, there you
Greg
go.
has a cool YouTube show he does called Inside Great Lakes Sailing.
There you go. Well, let's give it a shout out. We love it. Thank you, Greg.
Hi, welcome back. We have a very interesting story to tell you today. We're talking with Chris Block, who is a member of the Coral Reef Yacht Club. He is the chairman for the 2021 and the 2022 Orange Bowl Optimist Regatta Championships, which were just held in December. And we're going to go through the whole story. The picture behind me is, I think, a picture of that event.
Yep.
And it went on television. So I want to just briefly talk about that and how we get to that. But I'm kind of flipping through YouTube, and all of a sudden I see the sailing event up, and I think I'm watching Sail GP. So, Chris, first of all, thanks for taking the time to talk to us, and kind of explain what would happen when if you can watch this right now on YouTube and watch it online. It's
Sure.
maybe the best footage of any sailing anywhere, and I'm extraordinarily jealous of how good it is. So, talk a little bit about the event and specifically the television.
Okay, so the Orange Bowl International Youth Regatta is the largest youth sailing regatta in the Americas, second largest in the world behind the Guard Optimus meeting. Typically, it'll have around 700 competitors, 600 boats spread between Optimus Green and Red, White, and Blue, Club 420s, and the 3 Ilka classes. It's held every year on Biscayne Bay from December 27th to the 30th. And it's a mainstay on the youth sailing calendar, one of the most anticipated events of the year. It's great for a lot of different reasons. I would say the primary one is Biscayne Bay and the weather and conditions that typically prevail at that time of year. But it's a lot of fun to be in Miami, and it typically attracts a lot of the top U.S. sailors, and then a nice mix of international sailors. So people can come down to Miami, sail on a holiday regatta, and know they're going to get great competition and great conditions. So it's a great event. I was honored and humbled to be the chair the last 2 years, and one of the my approaches was that it's my job to help grow the event, help steward it as the past chairs have done. The event didn't get to be what it is without each chair adding more to it and really moving the ball forward. So one of the ways that we look to do that was to give people who weren't on the water, parents, grandparents, friends, family in other places, a look at what was going on Biscayne Bay. And, we thought of different ways you could do that. You've got photos, of course. You can go take video and cut it up and edit it and then, put it up there later. But what we want to try to do is actually show live racing from the bay in real time with live commentary, so you can tell people what is going on. So we decided to try this for the first time in 2021. I approached a club member whose name is Cynthia Demas. And she's not a sailor like myself, but she has her own communications company. She's a former news anchor, just a very talented communications person. And she jumped at the idea. She really she liked it. She likes a challenge, and we wanted to try to do it. So she had a drone crew that she had worked with on past projects, and she knew they had a little bit of sailing experience. So she went to them and said, "Hey guys, can we do this?" And they said, "Yeah, well, here's what we're going to need. Da da da. Like, I think we can try it." And so we did it we kind of tested it out in 2021. And back then we didn't know if it was going to work. So we didn't really tell anyone about it. We kind of the morning we were doing it, we just did it for one day on the red, white, and blue course. We just sent a little link out on our website. I was petrified that if we had publicized it and made a big deal of it, and then once you try to do it, it didn't work, we'd have egg all over our face. So we kind of just threw it out there, and it really couldn't have gone better that first day. We had great weather. We captured about 4 hours of Opti racing, three full races of 3 flights of red, white, and blue, so total of 9 races. And feedback was great. So we said we're going to try again in 2022, but we're going to do 2 full days, and we're going to spend half a day on each of our 4 circles. So that was the game plan. Basically got the same crew back together, which consisted of Cynthia, who was our, let's call her our play-by-play commentator.
Right, your anchor.
And this year we had John Pierce of U.S. Sailing. Our first year we had, we had another commentator from who's an Olympian sailor, and she did a great job. She's in a campaign right now, and wasn't available. So John stepped up and was Cynthia's commentator, and they really were great together because Cynthia knows nothing about sailing, so she would ask the questions that someone who had no idea what was going on would ask, and John would knock him down. And so basically have 2 drone pilots. So I think the key to this is there's always a drone in the air. So
Right.
If not 2, but if one needs to come back to the boat to swap out the battery, you still got a drone out in the water, shooting action. Then we also have a camera on the boat that could show Cynthia and John and what they were saying, and also kids. So after every race, we would always, part of our strategy was to anchor the media boat right off the finish line, so that after each race, the top 1 to 3 finishers could sail over to the media boat and get interviewed on air. Ask about what was going on the course, and or just say hi to mom, whatever they want to do. And that proved to be really great footage. So, on each of these 2 days, we spent about 4.5 hours out in the water, captured a lot of races, a lot of different moments, a lot of great footage of starts, a lot of great footage of mark roundings, of finishes, of tacks, of capsizes, of fouls, pretty much anything you would want to know or see about what's going on in the water, we were able to capture really closely in real time. So
A technical question is, how did you get a signal to YouTube from the water? How did that?
Yeah, so they have this device, the drone team. It's called basically a switcher, which was connected to a streaming device. So basically taking like a hotspot and connecting up to the cloud. I'm not a tech guy. I don't really get it.
No, okay.
We tested it out before we did it the first year. We brought it out into the bay and tried to figure out, approximate where we were going to be to make sure it would work. but it works pretty well. The signal, was pretty strong, and you could see everything. So it actually worked pretty well. And part of the goal in this was in addition to showing friends and family and parents what's going on out there, it gives the kids something that they could go back and look at and show their friends. I think one of the things I learned my son is that he's got a lot of friends who don't sail, and they play basketball or football, and they don't really understand what he does. When he goes out for 6 hours at a time, and the skill and the effort it takes to sail a boat in open water. You can show your friends, hey, this is what we do. This is what it's like. This is how the sport works. As well as have a nice coaching tool. I think, and I know there's coaches that are using this footage to teach, to show, because it's really in-depth footage where you're capturing entire races, not just little moments of practice, but an entire upwind with from a bird's eye view with a lot of tactical insight that you can gain from looking at that. So
Drones are being
we really like having it.
drones are kind of almost replacing. If you've seen high school football games with the towers in the end zone to get the high view, drones
Yeah.
are also replacing, because looking down on something straight is such different angle than looking from the sideline. So it's becoming, relatively routine technology. The unique part of this story is that you're not a sailor by your own admission. Your son went to a camp and got on a sunfish, and that led itself to being, part of the coral reef family. So
That's right.
This story is replicated in towns all over the country. And now you're, cheering, as a non-sailor, you're cheering, one of the biggest sail races. You don't have to be Dennis Conner to be involved in the sport. I think that's the cool part of what this part is.
Yeah, one of the things about Coral Reef is we're blessed with a lot of really experienced race committee and members of the sailing community. And so as the regatta chair, my job is really to make sure they have the tools to be successful and stay out of the way. And then just make sure we run an organized, well-staffed regatta. But as far as sailing know-how, that was I left that to the professionals, which we have plenty. We have great PROs, four really wonderful PROs at Orangeville this year, and actually for the last 2 years, our PROs were Mark Foster on our Opti Red, White, and Blue course, Shannon Bush on our Ilka course, Sharon Burke on our Club 420 course, and Tom McCormick, who's a local member of Key Biscayne Yacht Club, actually, has run our Green Fleet the last few years, and he runs an amazing Green Fleet course because he balances making it competitive with making it fun for the kids. I can tell you the kids at our Green Fleet at Orange Bowl feel like they are competing hard, but they're also having a great time, and there's not too much pressure or heat on them. But it's a really nice circle.
You should point out your son Sander, who was 9 at the time on a sunfish, is now 13 and is part of the national program.
Yeah, he's a member of the U.S. national team through USOTA. He qualified for that at team trials last year. And so he's gotten into it, and I think he likes the fact that I don't know anything, so I can't really question anything he does on the water, or if I say, well, why'd you go right at the gate there, and he's just like, shut up, Dad, you know what you're talking about. So, which is true, and
it's great.
Yeah.
No, the idea that a parent has to just watch and observe, you can't armchair them. It's impossible.
You can't. But back to the drone, the broadcast. One of the things that I really liked about it, I actually learned a lot from it. Listening to John. If you go and you watch a mark rounding that we've got, and you listen to what John is saying about what the sailors are doing, what the rules are, what the tactics are. I probably learned more from watching this broadcast than I have in 4 years of just being a Opti parent. So I would encourage others to go and watch it. You might learn a lot.
I'll try one. I'll try to find the part of that and overlay that part of this discussion. But at one point, there was a kind of a shift in the wind, and they had to get
Yeah.
back to the mark. And in order to get around the mark, it almost looked like a turnstile, getting through a turnstile in a subway, because it was one at a time, and they were all backed up and banging into each
Yep.
other. And it was not real. It was pretty ugly, but it was the guys that went wide got around it. But my point was is that it was just kind of fun because there's some kids that were really good sailors, and there was kids that maybe didn't understand it, but that's part of the sport. I mean, that's the way you learn.
It is. It is. I think it was a tide. There was a tide. The tide changed, or the current changed,
Okay, is that what it
and it
was?
was pushing kids. Yeah, kids were, they needed to overlay the mark in order to get around, and with the current shift, a lot of the kids weren't doing it, and they were getting trapped down there.
It looked like a
So yeah,
crapshoot to get
I
into
learned a lot
concert.
from it.
Yeah, no, this looked like
There's also some really good Green Fleet Mark roundings where the kids are just playing bumper cars.
yeah,
It's a lot of fun to watch.
yeah, for sure. Just
So
briefly, is when you say invitational, is this an open event to anybody that wants
it's
to
an
apply?
open
So
event.
it's not
Yeah,
exclusive.
it's an open first come first serve event. So there's obviously high demand when registration opens. The event does tend to sell out, but this year everyone who signed up on the first day eventually got in.
Okay,
We keep a wait list. We try to attract some, have enough international sailors to really be an international event. I think that's part of the allure. Is you're not just sailing against the same kids you sail against
right.
at local regattas. But yeah, it's open, and it's not a qualifier. So we're not qualifying kids for anything, and it's also not a championship. Meaning, it's not a world championship. It's not a North American championship. It means a lot to win Orange Bowl, but because it's still, the way I look at it, it's a vacation regatta. We can, we can have more fun. I said, and that's not to say qualifiers and championships aren't fun, but we don't have to do things like measurement. I would say the protest room, the hearings may not be as contentious as you would see, in championship or qualifying events. And kids can have a little more fun and relax a little more with their families. So,
So when you mention the protest room, is it possible there's helicopter parents in the sport of sailing as well?
just a few,
Okay,
just a few.
okay, well that's cool.
But our judges do a great job of keeping it cordial and making sure that we keep everything in perspective.
Last question: what was the most fun for you? It's a ton of work, obviously, to do that something this large. But what was is there something that you walked away with that was it was
Yeah, so I'll say a few things. Yeah, I've met a lot of really great people, gotten to work with a lot of great people, both at our club and outside of our club, through this event. It's a world that I'm not really familiar with. So getting to know families and race officers and judges, and sponsors has been tremendous. This year and when you look at the video recording, you'll see the logo. We had a title sponsor, which is Tucci, which is a company that makes outdoor shade products. They're based here in Miami. Tucci stands for the Ultimate Umbrella Company Incorporated, and they were founded here in Miami, and they're an international brand. They sell their umbrellas all over the world, and they became the title sponsor of our event. And I thought I really enjoyed working with their team on ways we could use their support to elevate the event. That's part of how we pay for things like live broadcasting, through the support of our sponsors. So it was great to bring that relationship on and work with them, and that relationship will actually, it'll survive me. It's a 3-year. We had a 3-year contract with them, so they'll be around, and that was exciting to me. The other thing that was exciting that happened this year, which was new, is the Orange Bowl committee, which is they're the overall body that organizes all the community events around the football game, of which we are one of them. We elevated our relationship with them this year as well, and one of the things that was really fun for me to see was that our champions, everyone who won their class at Orange Bowl this year received tickets to the Orange Bowl football game, and was brought onto the field at halftime and recognized in a ceremony on the field at the Orange Bowl football game.
Wow.
Which was very cool. And so that hadn't happened before. I'm hoping that's something that'll continue to happen. The other great thing they did is anyone who was affiliated with the regatta and had a ticket to the game was able to come on the field for that ceremony and for halftime. So we had about 120 people on the sideline for the halftime show, and then they were there to watch our 7 champions be recognized on at the stadium. They were up on the jumbotron, and I like that because I think it's really hard to win Orange Bowl. Particularly, all the classes are hard to win, but this is a very well attended, very competitive regatta. So it's a big deal, and honoring those kids by doing something that special, I think meant a lot to them, and it was great for me to see, and I had a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun being there. I was exhausted because it was actually the night. The Orange Bowl football game was the night the regatta ended. So we basically went from the award ceremony at 4:00 up to the stadium for the game. So,
It sounds very much like a full service community event, with all of the touches.
Yeah, and I'll emphasize, we look at it that way, and we recognize it's not easy to bring your family to Miami the week between Christmas and New Year's. It's a heavy lift, as I like to say. And we number one want to deliver tremendous racing for 4 days. And that starts with that. But on top of that, we need to deliver a great all-around experience from the moment you set foot at Coral Reef, at the what I call après sail. After the kids get off the water, what's going on at the venue, things to do, things for parents to do. Nice awards, nice trophies, nice gear in the welcome bag for the sailors, and a really hospitable environment at Coral Reef for all of our guests. So, those things are just as important to me.
Yeah.
To make sure that people keep coming back to Orange Bowl.
And historically, this has been a race that's been around since the 30s, but sort of solidified itself in '78 as a sort of an annual
Correct.
event that's handled at the.
Yeah, it became my understanding is 1978 is when it became the Orange Bowl International Youth Regatta. When it was
Okay.
it grew from just being a loose collection of sailboat racing to a focused youth event that invited international sailors to participate.
What's the farthest international sailor traveled, and what's the farthest U.S. continental United States traveled?
Yeah, so we've got a lot of people who come from the West Coast, which is great from the U.S. We have people who were here from Hong Kong.
Wow.
We had Seychelles this year. We have quite a few who come from South America. We had a great contingent from Argentina, Mexico, Peru, lots of Canadians. We're building back our European contingent. That COVID put a damper on people coming from Europe, but that's starting to come back now. Look, Miami is the place to be for sailing in the winter. I think most people know that, and I think once they get a taste of Biscayne Bay, people are excited to come back. So we get that sea breeze coming off the ocean, and there's really nothing better.
Yeah.
So.
Well, listen, Chris, I appreciate it.
We like it. We're very blessed by it. So we don't take it for granted.
An extraordinary story, and throughout this interview, you'll have seen some of the actual footage without sound, especially
cool.
the block area where they're coming around the mark single file. I think that hopefully we'll get into that whole thing. So, hey, listen, I appreciate your time, and have what's a great rest of the day, for sure.
You got it, Greg. And if you make it down to Miami, let us know. We'll have you over to the club.
Absolutely. Appreciate your time, and have a great winter. I want to thank Chris and Mitch for taking the time to talk with us about sail racing, and both at the youth level and the college ranks. Well-deserved honors for Mitch Brindley from Old Dominion, and Chris will step down as the chairman after 2 years of the Orange Bowl, but they've had some great strides in growth, and hopefully that will continue. It was an enjoyable show talking to both the gentlemen, and we hope to see you next time inside Great Lakes Sailing.